Rachel Reeves has defended her plan to generate billions of pounds for the UK economy by cracking down on tax dodgers. The shadow Chancellor says the Labour government will get tough on anyone who avoids paying their fair share for public services. But let's hear what she had to say. She's been speaking to our political editor, Christopher Hope.
Today, and thank you for having us here. You said in your statement there this is a concerted effort on tax avoidance. What's wrong with avoidance?
Well, I think that if you make Britain your home and you work here, you should pay your fair share of tax here. And that's what these plans are about.
Do you have an ISA?
Yes,
that's tax avoidance, so what's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with ISAs, and we're certainly not going to be cracking down on those or people saving into pensions.
Yes.
But what we've seen over the last few years at HMRC is a 20% reduction of cases opened and investigated looking at not things like ISAs and pensions, but not paying the right amount of tax. And similarly, we've seen the investigations into offshore activity. The number of cases investigated there halved during the course of this Parliament. And as a result, what we've seen is a tax gap now of £36 billion. And the National Audit Office say that £6 billion of that should be recoverable. And that's what the plans I'm setting out today are all about.
Yes. So you're talking about evasion, not avoidance. Evasion is illegal. Avoidance is legal, so we're clear on that. Because
well, so
in your statement you call people who avoid tax dodgers. But if you say for an ISA or a pension, why are you a tax dodger?
Well, there's a number of things we're setting out in our plans today. For example, at the moment, if you try and phone up HMRC, if you've got a tax query, you're lucky, very lucky, if someone answers the phone. And as a result, there are simple errors being made when people are submitting their taxes. And similarly, there's no requirement that tax schemes are registered with HMRC to establish whether they are legal or not. And so you'll have some people who are doing things that they think are okay, but they're not. And a simple answer to a simple question could often mean the right amount of tax is paid. But at the moment, that tax gap went up £5 billion in the last year alone. I want that money to be coming into HMRC to fund our frontline public services.
So we'll come on to HMRC in a second. You mentioned the Gareth Davis speech in January to MPs in Parliament, the head of the National Audit Office. He didn't mention anything about tax avoidance. He did say that he'd point to universal credit, where fraud and error cost taxpayers £5.5 billion a year. Why are you not going after benefit cheats instead?
Well, I think that it is important that we crack down on fraud, avoidance, evasion, wherever it exists.
But you're not doing it today. You're doing legally paying of tax avoiders rather than benefit cheats.
Well, the focus today is on cracking down on tax avoidance and ensuring the tax code is fully complied with, but also by closing the loopholes that the government have allowed to persist in terms of the treatment of non-DOMs. So, for example, in the first year of the implementation of their policy, there will be a 50% discount for non-DOMs to bring income into Britain. Well, no one else gets a 50% discount on their tax bill, and I don't see why non-DOMs should be treated differently. Similarly, the government has said that if a non-DOM puts their money in an offshore trust, that they won't have to pay inheritance tax when the time comes on that. That's not right either, because other people who live and work in Britain have to pay inheritance tax, and non-DOMs shouldn't be treated differently. In the first year of the next Parliament, that could bring in £1 billion just in the first year. Those are changes to the tax system that we would bring in to ensure that people pay their fair share of tax, and then that money goes into what I believe are the nation's priorities, reducing the backlog in the NHS waiting list, currently more than 7 million people on NHS waiting lists, as well as 700,000 emergency dental appointments a year and breakfast clubs in all primary schools. That's what the money will be used for.
So is that money hypothecated? So will the money go into the general spending pot?
I have allocated that money for this specific purpose. Now, actually, we would be set to bring in £5 billion by the end of the next Parliament through these policies. I've set out how we would use £2 billion of that to fund that investment in our NHS and in our schools.
Do you worry there might be a flight of capital before this, that people who are rich enough to be non-doms will just leg it, leave the country?
Well, that's what the Conservatives said about our policy before they stole it. If they want to make those claims today, I think maybe we might want to take those with a pinch of salt. Britain is a brilliant place to live and work, and that's why so many people want to come here to live and work. But if you choose to come to Britain, you should contribute to public services in the same way that everyone else does, whether it's paying for our army and our armed forces, whether it's paying for the police on our streets, or in this case, paying for our NHS and our schools. If you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here, and under Labour you will.
And just going back on to the Gareth Davis point, the speech you referred to, he talked about cracking down on fraud in the universal credit system. Will you be going off that as well at some point?
I think it's really important that we root out fraud wherever it exists, whether that is in the benefit system, because I want money to go to people that really need it. I'm at the hospital here in Manchester today, currently meeting some of the people in the frailty unit. There are a lot of people who struggle with mobility, who have disabilities, who are older and relying on the state pension. That money that goes into our benefits and pension system should be going to people that genuinely need that money. And there is no excuse for fraud or for tax avoidance. And we'll crack down on it.
Again, avoidance is legal and evasion is illegal. That's the point, I think. You understand that?
I understand that point.
That's the important point to people who save in pensions or ISAs. That's why I'm trying to make the point.
No, and that's a totally valid point.
Yeah.
But, for example, if, as a non-dom, you put your money in an offshore trust.
That's also legal at the moment.
Yes.
Okay.
But you're avoiding tax by doing that. I don't think that is right.
No.
And that is why we would change those rules to ensure that non-doms do pay their fair share of tax in Britain. That is tax avoidance that I believe is wrong, and that's why we would change the rule.
On HMRC there and customer service, 841,000 lapsed calls in January alone. You're on the phone and you put the phone and give up. 53% of staff there working from home, January to March, according to official figures. What will you do about customer service? People want to pay the tax and they don't know how it works. The tax book is too complicated. Will you demand, for example, all HMRC staff are there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as a bare minimum?
So I've appointed today a panel of experts led by Sir Edward Troop, the former permanent secretary at HMRC, to advise an incoming Labour government, if we are successful at the next election, on a number of things. First of all, how we can make real the plans that we've set out today to bring in that £5 billion that I know is there. But second, to modernise HMRC to ensure that the digital service works better, so fewer people have to phone up to get the support and advice. But then when you do phone up, that the phone is actually answered. It's not rocket science. One of the reasons why we lose out on so much tax is that simple questions are not answered because the phone is not answered. And that's why we've appointed this panel to make sure that there is better customer service within HMRC and that staff are properly productive, but also that we bring in the officials to HMRC so that those calls are answered again.
How many days a week? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for those in the office?
Well, look, my personal preference is to be in the office with colleagues. Sometimes 7 days a week. And I find that I'm more productive, more efficient, able to talk to my colleagues, able to learn and interact. Now, look, different people have got different needs, and it's up to managers to work with their staff. But I think whether you work in the public or private sector, productivity is likely to be higher in most cases if you're in the office with colleagues.
Talking about alleged tax avoidance, I got asked about Angela Rayner. Has she avoided capital gains tax on the sale of her house? If not, or do you not know? Have you seen the report she's asked for?
I have every confidence that Angela Rayner has paid the correct amount of tax. Now, these are allegations going back to 2015, when she was married to her ex-husband, when she lived in a property she no longer owns, and before she was a Member of Parliament. But she has since sought legal and tax advice. She is confident that she's paid the right amount of tax, and I have the utmost faith and trust in my friend and colleague, Angela Rayner.
Have you asked to see the report she's commissioned?
No, because I haven't asked to see the tax returns or the tax advice of any of my colleagues, and Angela Rayner shouldn't be treated differently from other MPs and other colleagues. Only at the moment the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition publish their tax returns. If the system's going to change, it should change for everyone, not just for Angela Rayner.
Will you publish yours?
If that is the system that people want,
Yeah.
I would be happy to publish my tax return. But that is not a system we currently have in the UK. And I don't think this should be done picking off one person at a time. And I don't think it is right that Angela Rayner is held to higher standards than anyone else.
You're raising $5 billion, which is great, I suppose, in terms of putting the economy back onto its where it needs to be. But do you worry that the scale of our debt is dwarfed by this $47 billion a year on interest payments? I mean, this is just nothing. It's barely a rounding error in your world, isn't it?
We're certainly not a rounding error. It's 2 million additional appointments a year in the NHS, 700,000 emergency.
In the grand scale
dental.
of spending, I mean.
I don't accept that it's a drop in the ocean. The difference that this can make is immense. But I would accept this, Chris. The economic inheritance that the next government will face, whether it is me as Chancellor or somebody else, is the worst economic inheritance since the Second World War. The first Parliament on record where living standards have actually fallen, the highest tax burden in 70 years, and debt as a share of our economy close to 100%. That's not the inheritance I would want as Chancellor, but it is the inheritance, if Labour win the next election, that I will have. That means difficult choices. It's why I have been so clear that everything that I put forward be fully costed and fully funded. That goes for me as Shadow Chancellor, and it will be my approach as Chancellor of the Exchequer as well.
Well, Rachel Reeves, thank you for joining us today on GB News in Manchester. Thank you.
Thank you.